Hello, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I want to do more psych and social prep because I think it was really useful for me to like watch you, like for you to help me with like answering the questions and seeing how you were like thinking through it. Is that okay?
Yeah, yeah. Just tell me how you did on your fulling.
I mean, a little bit better. I got 2 points higher, but like I think psych and social got a little bit better, but chem phys is still like
Mhm.
So I'm gonna spend tonight doing like Anki decks of like all of the second Chem Phys stuff and then trying to get the score up there. But I feel like if Psych and Soc goes up, it'll get my score higher overall.
Okay. What type of things in Chem Phys?
I don't know. It's like this one was very Orgo heavy, and I thought I had a really good handle on Orgo, and then like sitting and looking at the questions, it was just times where it was
Hmm.
not as strong of a foundation as I thought. But yeah, I don't know. I really want to do psych and soc today and like get that score up like as high as possible.
Yep.
So I'm loading the section bank. Okay.
Yeah.
Should I read it out loud last time? Research using animal models indicated that cocaine exposure during pregnancy, one, reduces oxygen levels and blood flow to the uterus, two, interferes with neural proliferation and synaptogenesis, and three, alters functioning of three neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine in the offspring during gestation, and thereafter impairs post-weaning discrimination, learning, and attention to skills.
Okay. So we have a couple of things that they're saying.
Just like correlation between cocaine usage and like these things.
Hmm. Yeah.
Okay. To study the effects of gestational cocaine exposure in humans, researchers enrolled 224 pregnant women in a large city from a large city in the eastern United States in a longitudinal study between 1989 and 1991. All the women had low socioeconomic statuses, but only half had confirmed cocaine use during gestation. The vast majority of the mothers in the cocaine exposure group, 99%, used cocaine during all 3 trimesters. Sorry, I'm like grabbing the piece.
Hmm.
Um, During all 3 trimesters of pregnancies, mothers of cocaine exposed infants had little or no prenatal care, and many used cigarettes, alcohol, and or marijuana in addition to cocaine before birth. Compared to control infants, cocaine-exposed infants were more likely to be admitted to neonatal intensive care units at birth, spend time in foster care, or live without with an adult cocaine user before age 10.
Okay, what's a longitudinal study?
Like they were comparing the results, like they were focusing on a specific area.
Uh, well, okay, longitudinal study is when you
Like I emphasize the location.
uh
So
it's
it's in the United States.
it's when you are looking at a test subject for um a long period of time
Mm-hmm.
to look at and see if anything changes over time.
Okay.
So a longitudinal study between 1989 and 1991, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, longitudinal. So like yeah, experimental design stuff, they'll
Mm-hmm.
ask in psych soc. So yeah, a longitudinal study will be when you look at some test subject um over some time period, prolonged period of time. Yeah.
Okay. And so then they gave us the statistics of that, like the percentage of likeliness.
Mm-hmm.
Um, okay.
I also have so I'm going to share it in the chat, but this is shared in the Google Drive. It's like a really big spreadsheet of lots of stuff. And
Mm-hmm.
down on the bottom, you can see the different tabs for the different things.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And yeah, if you click on behavioral science, that'll give you some stuff from that section, and then also like psych theories.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, go down to psych theories. There's that stuff as well. Oh, it's a tab.
Theories.
Psych theories, the tab.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see.
So that, and then also next to that is development. So
Mm-hmm.
all the different types of development that you're expected to know.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, I've seen a lot of questions about these too.
Mhm.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, anytime you see like an age, like 2 years old or something like that, you want to be thinking about that. But okay, good. Continue.
Sounds good.
Mhm.
Um, Contrary to the researchers' expectations, the cumulative effect of these adverse events did not put cocaine exposed children at a disadvantage over and above the effect of cocaine exposure alone. What does that mean? Adverse effects above the effect of cocaine exposure. So, as shown in Table 1, poor school performance and achievement scores were found for many low SES children in both the cocaine and control. So it was more socioeconomic than cocaine based.
Maybe. Yeah. So okay. And then we see this table here, and
Mhm.
we see the different, okay. So cocaine exposure group, and that's the first that column, and then the control group, and the p values, and we know that that's important when it's what type of value, like when it's what number p values.
I'm not sure.
Okay, so you know how in a lot of figures and charts and graphs they have like an asterisk.
Yeah. So it's like usually says something like if it's two asterisks, it's this thing versus this.
So usually
More likely.
they usually mean so a p-value that's less than 0.05 is
Uh-huh.
statistically significant, right?
Hmm.
So that's what you usually would see in the non-psych soc, like graphs and charts with like an asterisk that might even have like a p-value less than 0.01. But basically, in order for some difference to be statistically significant, they must have a p-value less than 0.05.
Okay.
So good. Okay. So they have these IQ scores at age 5 um, for these individuals, and then the p-value is pretty large. And then they have these other things like impulsivity, which is pretty much similar with the large p-value, sustained attention, large p-value. Impulsivity here, oops, yeah, has a p-value that's statistically significant. So
Yeah.
that's actually something that's different between the cocaine group and the control group. And then they have distractibility. They have successful progression through grades 1 through 4, reading below fourth grade level, math scores below fourth grade level, science scores below fourth grade level. So yeah, they have those as well. But the only one that seems to be statistically significant is distractibility task impulsivity.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so that makes
Oh yeah. 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 Good job. Because I guess these other choices like do show up in the chart, but are not.
what about like do you see the vigilance versus distractibility? Like the for this one it's practically the same,
Mhm,
but for this impulsivity it's much higher.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, so this choice that we chose Because what else you'll see in
That's during distraction tasks, but you see the impulsivity twice and you'd like kind of regard it as a trick answer. Like maybe it's not fully right, but I think it's the best one out of all of them because the other ones, they first of all didn't have the p-values.
Yep. Yeah, the impulsivity and the distraction task is the only one that's statistically significant. Something that you might see in charts could be something like this. Like, so these, so you know, like what error bars are?
Yeah.
So if error bars ever overlap, that would mean that they're not statistically significant.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah, so here we have, I mean, yeah, the values are exactly the same over here, but if we looked at, let's say, like reading and science or something, if you go down to that, um, like that, and then so we get to see that the numbers are pretty different here, but yeah, the reason that we're going to choose A is because of the p-value. So
Okay. All right. By limiting the initial sample to low SES.
mhm.
I feel like eliminating all variables that could have is a little bit too like extreme.
Okay.
Um, Reduce variability due to differences in quality of public schools, potentially, but I don't think we. I don't think B is right either.
Okay. Well,
It didn't say anything about prenatal,
okay.
but it was neo. Um, I think maybe D.
Did you say anything about C?
Reduce variability due to differences. I mean, like it works, but
So think about why you eliminated A and then look at D.
uh, all variables unable regarding prenatal because it doesn't say anything about prenatal exposure.
Oh, I was just gonna say that D is pretty extreme as well because like so whenever
Any conclusions? Yeah.
yeah. Like whenever you take a word and you assign a numerical value to it, if the numerical value is 100 or 0, like percent, that would
Hmm.
be extreme. So like all here is
Yeah.
100%, and then unable to draw any conclusions is 0%, right?
Yeah.
So
Okay. So C.
yeah. Why
Okay.
did you eliminate B again?
I just don't think that that's the direct connection.
Mm-hmm.
Like set up an experiment to assess how cocaine might affect the human brain.
Uh-huh.
That's not specific to like limiting to a low SES because it could affect in the same way than like a higher like socioeconomic community, but they didn't. They like why are they specifically using this one? So I think it has to do with like the location for the answer. And
Yeah.
this is just general like what the experiment is.
Yeah, so B would be like if you were to set up an experiment like instead of it being like a longitudinal study, it would be like, okay, let's set up an experiment where we have regular people's brains and then people who take cocaine and their brains, and let's look for what's different. So that would be like, setting up this new type of experiment that, specifically looked at brains, whereas this study is just a longitudinal study. It's not like we're setting up an experiment or anything. We're just looking at certain rates of things.
Okay.
Mhm.
All right. Normally distributed within a population.
So what's a normal distribution?
Like the distribution between the it's like it's within the range. I know it's like between two like things in the inside. I'm like remembering from stats where
Yeah,
it's like you have the like from the lowest to the highest value, but that's like the range, and then there's like a smaller one within it where it's like this is where most of the people fall into. I think it's like Q1 and Q2 or Q3
yeah.
is what it was called.
Are you familiar with the bell curve?
Yeah.
This? Yeah. So if we were to do this as a bell curve, that's what they do, like that's how they measure like IQ. So like for instance, like the highest point on the bell curve will be the average, which is going to be 100. And then usually they have like what is it? The like the sigma value for the um standard deviation would be 15 points. So this could be going up to 115. It can go down to 85. And so this means that like this region plus or minus one standard deviation, this is where the like 66% of people exist.
Okay.
So that's the normal distribution, the bell curve, and that's how they measure IQ.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Mhm.
So, um, this one then.
Mhm.
Score in the extremes doesn't make sense. We don't have any information to prove this, and only exceptionally gifted. Again, like there's no evidence to back that up. So this is, I think, the best answer choice.
Yeah, so D says that only exceptionally gifted children would have IQ scores above 85. Um, and then they say perfect test scores are rare during childhood. If they're exceptionally gifted, they would be above like the 115.
Okay.
Yeah. And then C says significantly more children will score at the extremes than in the middle, but we know from the bell curve that the middle is the largest amount of people. And then B just says a quarter of all children will perform poorly on at least one component of the exam. That's not something that, that's not an assumption for IQ.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like the
So,
next level would be 130 over here and like 70 over here. And like only 2% will exist at these values. Well, sorry, at least the 130, yeah.
okay. All right.
Mhm.
Animals, which area is least involved in the abilities measured in the first paragraph? This is oxygen level. Isn't this like left side of brain, most of this stuff?
Yeah, you can make it a little bit more general than that.
Uh, so that's frontal lobe, which includes, is it thalamus?
So tell me about that. What is the thalamus?
I don't remember. That's the issue, is that I'm thinking of like frontal lobe and I know like where things are located.
Hmm?
And I'm trying to like fit it into, this is what I'm saying when I say like psych and social is not great for me.
Okay, so let's see. So what can we eliminate?
Frontal lobe,
Okay. Anything else?
hippocampus,
Yeah, why?
because that's like speech and
It co-
um,
it it has to do with memory.
like learning, and so obviously.
Yeah, hippocampus has to do with memory. Like, have you ever heard like how like scent? I mean, this is like from like a commercial, but like scent is strongly associated with memory.
Yeah.
So that's because like the hippocampus, like in the brain, it's kind of like it kind of presses into the region responsible for recognizing smells. Um,
Okay.
so we can eliminate that. Now we have the thalamus and the hypothalamus.
Hypothalamus
Hmm?
and
Mhm.
hypo.
What's the hypothalamus responsible for?
Isn't this like hormones?
Mhm. Okay.
Which is really related to this, but it is because it says like dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. Um, so the thalamus is also something to do with like
Oh, so I was asking the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine. Are those hormones?
their neurotransmitters, so it's like sending signals.
Mhm. Yeah. So they're not hormones, right?
Right.
So, yep, that could have something to do with it.
But that's not a role of the hypothalamus, so it might be the role of the thalamus. I don't know, like those two, I'm like getting confused, I think.
So hypothalamus involves hormones, right?
Yes.
Hmm. And the stuff mentioned in paragraph one do not mention hormones, right?
Right. Okay, so that would, I just wasn't sure if I was like thinking of the correct like function. So I
Mhm.
didn't want to cross it out.
Yeah. So like it would make sense to be left with C and D. Um, and you know that C has to do with hormones because that's, you know your like hormones, right? Like
Yeah.
hypothalamus will release some releasing hormones into the anterior and posterior pituitary gland, right?
Yes.
Which would then let it travel through the bloodstream to where it needs to go. So that's what the hypothalamus is involved in. The thalamus, I would imagine, is the region of the brain that the hypothalamus is under, right?
Yeah, that makes sense. So it also has something to do with like hormones, but probably in a more broad sense. Like you're saying that the hormones travel to like whatever part of the body they're needed in. So maybe it's like sends them. I don't know. I'm like grasping at straws here.
So so we know that the hypothalamus is involved in hormones. We also know,
Like, I get that it's not the answer here, but I also just want to know what the thalamus does now.
yeah, so I was going to say that we know that the hypothalamus is involved in hormones. We know that the hypothalamus is in the brain as well. So maybe the portion of the brain that the hypothalamus is near is the thalamus,
Right.
right? So so hypothalamus is in the brain near the thalamus, which is a brain region, but the hypothalamus is the one that's responsible for the hormones, whereas the
Okay.
thalamus would be that uh, relay center in the brain.
Okay, that makes sense.
It can, yeah, where it can like guide and affect um what type of hormones will be necessary.
Okay.
Mhm.
Which would, all right.
So in the here, I'll take a
Serves as the relay station for information, which comes and goes to the cortex, plays a role in memory, which contradicts. Okay.
yeah, in the chat, I'm putting a screenshot of an image, but this is for my notes. So so this image is in the
I,
PDF.
I was actually looking at this morning.
Yep, yep. Yeah, so you can see that the thalamus, I write, is the relay center for the somatic, aka conscious sensation, and it
Mm-hmm.
and it relays info between the spinal cord and the cerebral cortex, whereas the hypothalamus is responsible for, well, the things that I wrote, but through the process of hormones.
Okay.
Yep.
Through the process of hormones, that makes sense.
Mhm.
Researchers hypothesized that cocaine is pharmacologically active in the primate fetal brain when pregnant primates are administered cocaine. A dose is typically used by human drug dealers, which experiment best supports their observation.
Hypothesis.
Their I'm gonna say D
So let's
because it's the only one that like is actually our blood flow to the brain. So B and D are the only ones because or no interferes with neural proliferation, had an increased tolerance to pain. Uh, I'm looking at this first paragraph and trying to like see if I can rule any of them out because now that I'm like looking at it, a lot of them would
Mhm.
work.
think about though what
Internalization of dopamine receptors. It almost seems like they wouldn't. It would be the opposite. Internalization. Cocaine entered the fetal circulation.
so let's see if
I
let's
just
Yeah.
Could these be necessarily proven to be correlated with cocaine? Like I'm saying the tolerance to pain or like glucose metabolism increasing.
So I was going to say there's certain things here that we don't have the ability to really see.
Test, like in vitro.
What's that?
Is that what you were saying? Like how like we don't necessarily like know that this is true or not true?
Oh no, I was just saying that some of these we don't really have the ability to see. Um, but I also wanted to respond to what you said about choice D.
Mm-hmm.
So, so okay, let's think about that. So, cocaine would upregulate the release of neurotransmitters like dopamine, right?
Yes.
Now, if it does that, then why do we say that it's bad, you know? I mean, if it does that, why isn't it something good?
Because you shouldn't be getting as much as you're getting on it.
Yeah, why?
Um,
Think about,
there's like levels to how much like your body can handle, and then if it exceeds that, then it like starts having negative effects.
yep, so now let's think about how those negative effects come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're flooding you know, your brain with dopamine, for instance, your brain will act like, okay, we have a lot of dopamine, right? So we don't need all of these dopamine receptors, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what would happen in anything that involves building up a tolerance would be that the receptors will start to be like, okay, I'm not needed anymore, you know? And that would make it internalize, which essentially means
Uh,
using those receptors. Yeah. So that's something that could actually happen. But also, I wanted you to see that we don't really have the ability to really check that in terms of some type of brain scan. Like it's not really easy for us to see like, okay, so you've had these dopamine receptors internalized. Um now so those could be two reasons why D would not be it. For B, I think it would also not really be possible for us to see if cocaine entered the fetal circulation, right?
the fetal, like what circulation? Like the blood circulation?
Hmm. Yeah, you know how like you know um there's fetal hemoglobin, which has a higher, yeah.
So we wouldn't be able to test if there's blood, like that if there's higher levels of it.
I guess if we
What
uh
about like, the amnio, like when they stick the needle into it?
yeah, so maybe that way, but not through an imaging study. Like we can't really.
Right. Okay, I get what you're saying, that it's like the wording that you have to be careful of.
Oh, yeah. So because what we're being asked in this question is just that, okay, researchers have a hypothesis that cocaine is pharmacologically active in the primate fetal brain when pregnant primates are, administered cocaine, right? Now, what observation can we make that would support that hypothesis? The hypothesis being that cocaine is pharmacologically active in the primate fetal brain. Um, because also, if it was that type of like, amniotic, taking the amniotic fluid out and seeing like, okay, there's cocaine in this,
Hmm.
if we were able to do that, we still wouldn't necessarily know that it's pharmacologically active in the primate fetal brain, right?
Yes.
So what would help us know that?
So which one wouldn't we be able to tell that like it's increased tolerance? I think A,
Okay.
like glucose metabolism, like
Mm-hmm. Yep. Go on.
I don't know, I'm just looking at the options of I still think that because that was my first point is that
Uh-huh.
um like increased tolerance to pain, there could be so many other causes for something like that. But if they're looking for a correlation, then I don't know, it just
Mhm.
am I on the right track? Like is it
Yeah. Yeah. So just tell me, explain to me why A would be a good choice.
so we were talking about how they're looking for things that you can actually can observe so that like crosses out all these like imaging studies where it's like even if it is potentially
Mm-hmm.
possible, that's something easier to test would
Yeah.
be like levels of certain like metabolism. And so we were talking about how if something's going on and if you're getting like an increased level of like cortisol or something, then the body wouldn't need to be like producing more. So like certain like receptors would go in. So that's like the internalization concept, but I don't know. I think that this one makes more sense to me.
Yeah. Maybe it could even help to think, okay, like forget the fetal brain part. Let's take a regular person. What type of thing that we can do to a regular person to show us that this person has um pharmacologically active cocaine in their system?
When you do like a drug test,
Well, I guess that can tell
you
us.
would just like test for certain like levels of like what's going on in the brain.
Yeah, because yeah, if you do the blood test or urine test to check for that, you can see that there's metabolites, but to see if it's pharmacologically active, we want so like cocaine is like a stimulant, right?
Hmm.
That would cause, that would cause a higher amount of like cellular respiration, which would mean that glucose metabolism is going up.
You need more energy.
Hmm. Yeah. So you could see something like, higher, like an MRI would help you see like higher um oxygen levels being used. You can also see or connect that to glucose metabolism as well.
Okay,
Mhm.
that makes sense.
Yeah. So here we're looking for an experimental observation that supports a hypothesis. And the hypothesis is that it's not necessarily that cocaine is in the fetus. It's that
But
cocaine.
that it's like you have to like read it carefully and see that it's saying like pharmacologically active. And so the other ones are more or less just testing like if it's present. Like if you could test for fetal circulation, wouldn't it just like show that that it's there? It doesn't you still don't know if it's like pharmacologically active. I think tolerance to pain is still too broad.
Yeah.
Um, and internalization of dopamine receptors, like theoretically it would be good, but like you said that it's not something that you can test.
Hmm. Yeah. It'd be pretty hard to test also like, increased tolerance to pain.
Hmm.
Yep.
Especially on a fetus, so I can't express.
Hmm.
Okay. Which characteristic collectively describes the three molecules that are functionally altered in offspring as a result of fetal exposure to cocaine? Each molecule
What can we remove or get rid of?
alters the functioning, so we don't. I'm like leaning towards getting rid of A just because of the extreme.
All right. There's also what we talked about. Well, so what three molecules are they referring to?
So it would be the dopamine, serotonin, and
And remember
norepinephrine.
how I mentioned how those aren't hormones?
Yeah,
So that could be another reason to eliminate A because it's
yeah.
endocrine glands. Um, Endocrine glands would mean that things would be transported through what?
Through isn't it through blood?
Yep, through blood vessels. Like that question that we had that was like,
The
uh,
erythrocytes.
I think that one. No, it was one that was about it was about paracrine, autocrine,
Mm-hmm. Oh,
or
I remember, yeah.
yeah, that one. And we talked about how if you want to make something that affects something that's far away, it would need to it would need to travel through the
Right.
blood vessels. Yeah. So okay, we can get rid of A.
Um, synaptic membrane within this. I'm looking at D.
Okay.
Neurotransmitting transmits signals between two neurons at a faster speed because it is saying that they're altered, but we don't know if it's getting faster or not.
Yeah. So I think for Psych Soc, since what you mentioned before about, you know, things still being kind of stuff that you have to learn, I guess it would
Mhm.
make it more uh beneficial for us to be able to find real reasons to eliminate these wrong choices. So when they say faster speed, transmit signals between two neurons at a faster speed, what's something like, something that that's kind of like referring to? Like how can you make like an action potential, let's say, travel faster through
Like
neurons?
with a you're saying like the fact that it's a stimulant, so it could like affect like speed up certain reactions.
Just in general, like what can happen to neurons to make it that they can transmit signals faster?
Like something happens to speed up the reaction, like let's say if it's an enzyme and a substrate, it would be like the substrate like binds to the active site and it speeds up.
So maybe
You're asking about like psych and social examples, I know, but
so let's say we have this that I drew, and now let's say that I had this.
okay.
You see what I drew?
Yeah.
Okay, what's the difference here?
It's flowing straight versus through like specific sections. It has to jump from one to the next.
Jumping, okay, good. What are these things?
And yeah, it'll is it urgent?
You want it comes.
Yes, but okay, sorry.
Uh-huh. Yeah,
What are those?
yeah.
The gap junctions that they're talking about.
Hmm. I mean, if they're gap junctions, it would look like this, where
Because they're like right next to each other.
so gap junctions means that there are gaps between cells, which means that their cytosol or cytoplasm is contiguous,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
and that works for like cardiac tissue, since that involves, well, in the blood, in the heart, you want like certain parts of the heart, like the atria, to contract at the same time, and you want the ventricles to contract at the same time. And that can happen through these gap junctions, which are gaps between these cells, right? Because
Mhm.
signal can just travel through. But the stuff that I drew here, the signals cannot travel through, right? They would have to jump, as you said.
Mhm.
So what are these things that, it also would tell you about the so what's the difference between white matter and gray matter?
Gray matter is like presence of plaque, right?
Of what?
Of plaque.
Um, not really. Not necessarily.
I remember reading about it in like a
So
second like
so
study.
and Alzheimer's can cause something to happen, which would mean less white matter, more gray matter.
Mm-hmm.
But what is that thing? So
Alzheimer's is associated with brain plaque, though. That's what.
yeah, there's the beta amyloid plaques, but there's also okay, so I'll tell you what these are. This is myelin.
Oh,
Yeah, which is
we were
like,
literally looking at it like actin and myelin.
oh wait, not so you're thinking of actin and myosin.
So that's different. I thought like myosin was like had something to do with like the myelin sheaths. No?
The myosin is like the thick, when you're looking at the cross bridge of like skeletal muscle, there's myosin and actin,
Okay.
right? In a sarcomere,
Yeah.
right? That's different from myelin, which is MYEL, or
Myelin, yeah.
yeah. Now that is like a type of fat that can wrap around a neuron. And unlike a gap junction, it does not allow the action potential to go through it, which is why the action potential has to jump between these regions between the myelin sheath, which are called nodes of Ranvier,
Mm-hmm.
and it jumps, which is called why it's called saltatory uh, conduction.
Mm-hmm.
Saltatory is it's either Greek or Latin for like jump. So the signal has to jump. Whereas for demyelinated axons, like it'll just go straight.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it travels significantly faster through myelinated axons um, because of that saltatory conduction. So in D, where they're referring to faster speed, that's what they're referring to. And white matter um, is myelinated axons, whereas gray matter,
Is
yeah, is not myelinated. So in the thing that you read about Alzheimer's,
mm-hmm.
perhaps like so one of the things other than making the beta amyloid plaques for Alzheimer's is demyelination. So
Right.
demyelination, you're having less of that white matter and more of that gray matter. So I think that's where what you were thinking of in regards to the relationship with demyelinate.
But yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it can help to see how these other answer choices turn out to be valid things in psych soc
Mm-hmm.
rather than just, completely random things. So this way we can learn some additional psych soc terms. But yeah, this faster speed would be for myelinated axons, and then the gap junctions are different from myelinated axons. It's like, you know,
So does this answer like not make sense because faster speed is for something else?
yeah, yeah.
Okay. To target neuron.
So that means we can get rid of it. We can get rid of A because we discussed how it's not hormones, but neurotransmitters.
That are functionally altered, but receptors CNS postsynaptic. B
So,
makes sense. I don't think that it would be altered.
so what's this question asking us?
Like describes the three molecules, the dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and how their like function would be altered with the presence of cocaine.
So, are they asking how it would be altered, or are they just asking the
Functionally altered. Which characteristic describes?
so is it asking how they're functionally altered, or are they just asking about the ones that happen to be functionally altered?
About the ones that are.
Yeah, that why I use the word happen to be functionally altered to say that we're not being asked how it's functionally altered. We're just being asked the ones that are functionally altered, what can
Mhm.
we say about them? So that we're really just being asked, how can we describe dopamine, serotonin, and norepinephrine? Right? It just asks what characteristic collectively best describes the three molecules that are functionally altered, right? So they're not really asking,
Also, they're asking you to give like a general description of what the three of them do.
yeah, yeah.
Oh, well, they're target neurons within the cerebral, like it like fuels a reaction. So like, or it's a response to a reaction, like if some like fight or flight or something else. That's why I'm thinking that B is wrong because it's saying central nervous system, and I think it would be like paracrine, autocrine.
Well,
Uh,
well, tell me about what happens with neurotransmitters. Where do they work their magic?
in the brain mainly.
Where in the brain, though? Think about neurons.
Well, it would be central nervous system. It's like neurons go all throughout the body,
So
but it's like a chemical reaction. Like epinephrine is
it would be something like this, right?
right.
Like the end of one neuron, the beginning of another.
But like the thing with the target neurons is like if um part of the body needs to be receiving it. That's what I liked about that answer choice.
So we're looking for an answer choice that just describes neurotransmitters, right? So
Yeah.
how would you, if you just had to answer the question, how do neurotransmitters, like to describe them? How would you do that?
They target the area between neurons. They attach to the area between neurons.
Okay.
And
So so what I drew here is this is the area between the neurons, right?
right.
And so like let's say dopamine gets released here and can get taken up here, right? And do you remember what this gap was between the two neurons?
The myelin
Oh, well, the myelin is
within the
yeah,
left.
yep, the synaptic cleft,
Right.
right? And maybe we can call, so synaptic cleft or synapse, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then here we can call what? Presynaptic.
Presynaptic, and then postsynaptic would be.
Yeah.
That make it B. Is that
Yeah. So a couple of things about this question that you want to do, right? We want to always make sure we understand exactly what the question is asking us. And also know that 99% of the time they want us to be confused about what the question's asking us. So this question isn't really asking us, okay, how are these functionally altered? They're just asking what characteristic best describes the three molecules that are functionally altered, which means that we look in the passage for the ones that are functionally altered. We find them here, dopamine, serotonin, epinephrine, and now we have to choose a choice that best describes how neurotransmitters function. And so when we're left with B and C, C says that they're distributed to target neurons within this spinal fluid, right?
yeah?
And
Cerebrospinal fluid isn't really
yeah,
where that's
they're not really traveling through that cerebrospinal fluid, like, whereas what they're really doing is they're going from one neuron to the next.
which makes sense that it would be on a smaller scale.
Yes, yes, yes. And yeah, bind to a receptor on the postsynaptic membrane within the central nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so they're asking us just how to describe neurotransmitters, and we eliminate A because that's what a hormone does. We eliminate D because that's making us think of myelin, like the thing that would cause a faster speed would be the myelination,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the gap junctions we eliminate because that's when you have contiguous cytoplasm. But we know about the synaptic cleft, and we know about how neurotransmitters travel from one neuron to the next. So that would be our answer B. Okay.
That was a hard one.
Mhm.
Best describes why continuous reinforcement is the beginning, best for the beginning acquisition. Um,
So what can you tell me
trying
about?
to think about like which I can cross out because
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask, what can you tell me about operant conditioning?
it's like based on behavioral analysis, and you're looking into like, well, I mean, there's a whole bunch of different conditions. There's like positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. So it's just like conditioning a response from like whoever is like it's being done on.
Okay.
But then with like acquisition trees, that's like the beginning of the experiment pretty much. It's like when they're learning all of these like conditioned responses. So I'm thinking B, like motivation isn't like concretely universally the same for everyone, so it can't really be like an independent variable in an experiment.
Okay.
So schedule might be wrong. That's where I'm going with B.
Uh,
Incorrect responses, I don't really know that I like that one either.
so tell me a little bit more about operant because there's two types of conditioning, right?
What is operant and the other one? I took like psych and I took behavioral analysis my like first semester freshman year, so I'm like remember it. And then when I'm looking at these kinds of things, like I remember what positive punishment is, negative like new reinforcement, all of those things, but I don't remember what the other type of conditioning is.
So it's just called classical conditioning,
Oh, okay.
right? Um, and it's really just
So classical is just like, so what would operant be? Is like actually changing
so like
certain
what's the example they typically give for classical or the person?
the person. I know that like Pavlov's dogs is used a lot for one of these.
Exactly, exactly. So what was the situation with Pavlov's dogs?
Like they were conditioned, like a conditioned response was observed, and it was like the food at the same time every day.
Good, good.
And there was something with a bell, right? Like if they heard the bell ringing, they knew that they were gonna get the food.
Yep, yep. Now, do they use any type of reinforcement or punishment?
In that experiment, I don't remember.
So if you just remember the bell and the food and the dog
Mhm.
salivating, that's it for classical. But op
Has the different like like reinforcers.
yeah, so that's like BF Skinner and like this.
Yeah, I remember his name.
Yeah, yeah. It sounds like a more mean name to me. So, but maybe I'm thinking of like
So there's like
the principle.
positive and negative reinforcement and
Yeah.
positive and negative punishment.
Yes.
And then there's like extinction of a behavior. Like we had a whole bunch of examples of like if a kid is like screaming in a store, like what should the parent do? I
Yeah.
remember those ones would come up a lot.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's talk. Okay. The okay, let's first distinguish reinforcement with punishment. So reinforcement would just be anything that would cause that behavior to happen more, whereas punishment is to make that behavior happen less.
Okay.
Now, positive and negative aren't necessarily like, I guess, what usually come to mind when you think of positive and negative, like good and bad. It's not, doesn't mean that. Positive means you're adding something.
And negative means it's removing, but it's also usually like associated with something that's not great. Like the negative reinforcer is like if you're hearing a really loud sound and then once it stops,
Yep.
you
Yep.
don't want it to restart, so you do something.
Yeah, yeah. So, so you could have like, if you had like positive reinforcement, that could be like, okay, we want a behavior to happen and we're gonna add something. So that would be like giving food or something
Mhm.
good. Whereas like negative reinforcement could be like, you're removing something that's not good, right?
Okay.
Like removing
So
like
based off of that, I'm gonna assume that like Pavlov's dogs, like was it like a treat for good behavior? Like if they heard the bell ring and they came, they would get their food.
well, the Pavlov dog again is the classical.
Oh, right, right. Sorry.
Classical is just to make something like associated.
Mhm.
Whereas operant is it could involve making something happen more, like reinforcement, or it can make something happen less, like punishment, to decrease behavior. Um, so you could like, if it's positive punishment, you're adding something to make person that person's behavior decrease. So you can add like, I don't know, like the loud sound maybe. And
Positive punishment.
because yeah, positive means you're adding something, negative means you're removing something, and if it's punishment, you want something to stop, so you would add something bad or remove something good.
Yeah.
For reinforcement, you can add something good or remove
Or
something.
take away something bad.
Yeah. So that's just operant versus classical. Bless you.
Thank
And there's also these types of like
you.
and bless you. So there's also these types of schedules that could influence how well something gets learned or unlearned.
Okay, so continuous reinforcement. Just like the time, like you were talking about schedules at which they're being reinforced. So if it's like a continuous cycle of like noise, no noise, or treat for good behavior, then it's like
Mhm.
mm, but it could be a negative reinforcer. So I'm gonna guess C is wrong too.
I have some notes here.
Like I'm still gonna go back to like my points for the answer choices. Like I don't think that like the time for incorrect responses is necessarily like on par with the answer for I think it's just not necessarily focused on the results. Like it could be like greatest accumulation, greatest pleasure. We don't know what oh no, I went out of it. We don't know which response is. Oh, I'm not in Jack Weston anymore. Oh. I'm going with A.
Yep. Sorry, so I was just taking some pictures. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it unambiguously informs the subject which behavior is correct. And I put, yeah, I emailed you some notes.
Just now?
Yeah, if you could just open that.
Okay.
Okay, so yeah, let's see if you can, yeah.
Oh, sure.
So yeah, so we have classical here, which is just, oh, is it like,
Yeah, well, let me zoom in more. It's like
yeah, okay, so
freak.
we have, so we have, okay, so associative is classical and operant conditioning, a type of learning and memory. Classical unconditioned stimulus that, oh, it's any stimulus that brings about a, what did I write there?
Reflective reflex slash response UCR. Innate.
Yep. Yeah, unconditioned response. And then it uses unconditioned stimulus and
Stimulus plus to turn. Okay.
neutral stimulus into conditioned stimulus. That's called acquisition, right? And
Yeah.
we have like the drawings that I made with the unconditioned stimulus, which is food, causing the unconditioned response to the dog to salivate. Then you add that with this neutral stimulus, which is a bell, and that produces no response. And after you do this enough times, the bell will cause the the conditioned stimulus, bell, will cause the conditioned response, salivation. And I have extinction, which is habituated to the conditioned stimulus, not producing the conditioned response anymore, spontaneous recovery, generalization, discrimination, etc. And then I have these types of schedules underneath. And then in that next page, yeah, this one. Yeah, I go into this more in depth with operant and the positive, negative, the reinforcement, punishment, escape learning, avoidance learning, and then the fixed ratio, variable ratio. Oh, and then shaping. That's what so shaping on the bottom over here, process of rewarding increasingly specific behaviors. That's what we're doing in the question that we just had with the making sure that the
Acquisition phase.
yeah, to make sure that the that we are teaching the subject which behavior is correct,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something through the process of shaping through operant conditioning. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Right.
Yep.
A. Two male children raised with different biological parents that are adopted in infancy and raised together. Which observation best supports the idea that hereditary is an important determiner of intelligence? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Phenomenal will an animal trainer most likely try to avoid when training a rabbit for a television commercial? What phenomenon will it most likely? Well, let's think about it. An operant extinction in the experiment could be like it wouldn't run off stage. Like it wouldn't have a tendency to run off when it's like loud, here's a loud sound. So I'm crossing out A. I'm gonna try to like match something to each of these.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Instinctual drift, is that like based off of like the natural instincts of the rabbit? But that would also go for like the loud noise. It wouldn't want it to feed into its own like instincts. It would want to stay away from them. So I think that maybe B is something that we would stay away from. Partial reinforcement versus like total reinforcement is just like the time that it is spent, right? That's like goes back to the scheduling thing. Like it partially reinforced is not every time that like the rabbit does something it'll get a response, but wouldn't that be bad? Like not to have a conditioned response because
Oh,
for partial reinforcement, I'm looking at it, I'm saying that I don't know if that would be a bad thing for like if you're trying to train a reaction for it to not like receive like whatever the reinforcer is every time that it happens, that like the action happens, that would probably be bad because it wouldn't like condition a response in the same way.
yeah. So this can be one of those kind of schedules. Like the question we had before was like continuous.
Mm-hmm. So
And
this, I mean, I understand that it's like scheduling
yep.
and that, so most likely try to avoid would be like the instincts that the rabbit has. But then these things are probably like not the best way to like train it. So that's like a little bit more specific, but then what should it avoid at all costs is like the instincts that the rabbit has.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Was that like a good way to think about it? Like try to like associate an experiment with each one or like how that would work?
Yeah. Like what you did was we looked at C and D and you're like, okay, this may not be as good as continuous reinforcement, but it's still a valid type of reinforcement. D, I guess, is still valid. It may not, give you the same results as continuous, but it's still valid because you do want, your animal to not have to just rely on getting the right type of reinforcement thing.
So like a stimulus generalization was like if you're conditioning a rabbit, like if you see a light, you have to stay still. And so if it sees a camera, it'll also sit still versus like if something else like a stage light pops up. I don't know, like that might be too specific. So it's like a similar response, but if the like stimuli are similar enough, it's like fine.
Huh? Yeah. So you saw C and D as maybe not the best things you want, but still valid. But when you said like, okay, what's wrong, or you said something like what's wrong in every case, or what's always not a good thing, uh,
Yeah.
the instinctual drift, yeah.
Because like I know rabbits are like very like fearful animals. So if like you're going off of their natural instincts to be afraid of everyone, it probably won't be like
Mm-hmm.
a good.
Yep.
Okay, a person has left his shopping list in the car but decides not to go back for it because he's confident that he has the list memorized. Upon returning home, he realizes that he remembered most of the items from the beginning and ends of the list, but forgot many items. Oh, I remember this. This is serial position. You always remember like the first few and last few,
Yep.
right?
What is it called with the first couple and then the last individually? What are they called?
Hindsight bias is like when you only remember the last ones, like beginning, I don't know, but it's like you only remember the first few.
So the first few, that'll be called the primacy effect.
Privacy
And
effect, yes.
couple is is the recency effect.
So what is hindsight bias? Isn't that when you're more likely to remember the last ones?
That's how they say hindsight is 2020.
Yeah, but hindsight is just because wouldn't that have to do with recency effect?
So hindsight, when they say hindsight is 2020, they mean like everything in like at the moment, you may not be making a good decision, but after that moment, you can look back on it and see like, oh, I should have done this or I should have made this decision. So when you look at something in hindsight, when they say hindsight is 2020, it's like you can see so clearly in hindsight, whereas when that thing was actually happening, it wasn't possible to really think or see things as clearly.
So it's like immediately you don't remember what you're being asked, but then like if you go back and you're like, oh wait, I remembered another word.
Oh no, it's not necessarily about remembering, it's just how you view it, right? It's like if I um so like let's say I take the MCAT and I get some score, and then after that I realize, okay, so when I first took my MCAT, I spent way too much time on a radioactive decay question, and I ran out of time for like the last two passages of like the CP section and the last discrete. So
Mm-hmm.
at that time, I wasn't able to make the decision of, oh my God, I'm running out of time. I need to move on. But after that, I was like, oh crap, I should have moved on.
Right. Okay, I understand.
2020, yeah. But also, yeah, it's good that, yeah. So if we in psych especially whenever you see these other terms in the choices, even if you got it right, you want to learn what those terms are because psych is all about learning the terms. So do you know like chunking?
Um, can I make a guess that it would be something like you remember like a good chunk of the words, but then like that's all that you focus on memorizing?
Kind of. It's like if you can remember things in chunks. So I have this in my notes, I'm gonna just send it to you. But like it's a way. So yeah, I wrote chunking, also known as clustering, taking individual elements of a large list and grouping them together into groups of elements with related meaning.
Mm-hmm.
So, so like if you were to, so it's like if you were to memorize the amino acids, you can chunk them like,
Into polar, non-polar,
hmm,
basic, acidic. I understand. Okay, so that would be chunking it into groups.
mhm.
See, sometimes like things like this, I think you can usually guess, and then I remembered serial position, so I knew right away that the answer for this one was A.
Mhm.
And then decay, would that be like, would it have anything to do with positioning, or is it just like as you go down the list, like your memory recedes?
Oh, that just so decay is just over time your memory, you forget things. Like if it was like 100% here and like day zero and it gave you a list to remember,
Okay.
it would kind of go like that. And so let's say on day two, your knowledge of that first list is like 60%. But that's what,
Short-term versus long-term memory is.
oh no, no, this is just natural, like to forget something. But that's what Anki is there to prevent. In this SAT guide thing that I think I sent you that, right?
You did. I was really confused why you sent me an SAT guide, but then I like remembered it was probably related to.
Oh yeah, yeah, the vocab stuff. Yeah, I also go over like Anki in that because Anki, you have this natural extinction of forgetting something, but when you in 2 days see that card again, you'll go back up to 100% and the decay will become a little flatter, right? And then let's say on day four, you remember like, let's say 70%, you get that card again, so it goes back up to 100 and it just gets flatter and flatter and flatter.
I understand.
Hmm?
Reinforcing the knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
A is correct. Just research on a cognitive aging has demonstrated that in general, aging does not diminish a person's. Declarative information is like short-term memory acquiring. It doesn't like really depend on like how long they will remember it, but I'm thinking maybe A, like you can still process the information. It's just a matter of like whether or not you're gonna like commit it to memory. Like retrieve general information. You don't know if they're like long-term memory loss or short-term memory loss, but are these like specific? Am I getting too in depth with it? Is it like, well, as like you age, memory recedes. So I think like coping with Alzheimer's is definitely not going to be like a correct answer choice here, because that's a degenerative disease. Capacity for controlling memory processes. Again, it's like it depends on like the type of memory loss. So I think A is the most like least specific, and I think that you can still absorb the information like generally on an age basis without the like effect of like a stroke or something like that to be considered. And then it's just a matter of like whether short-term memory loss or long-term memory loss that like processing information changes. So I'm going A.
So let's see. Capacity for acquiring new declarative information.
And it's just like if somebody like says something to you, like you can you can acquire the information. It's just a matter of like committing it to memory.
So okay, so with aging, that's usually associated with, do you know like the difference between like crystallized intelligence and fluid intelligence, let's say?
I don't think so.
So crystallized is like what you would imagine, like it's like solid or whatever.
Mhm.
That's like the knowledge of things that you know, whereas fluid is being able to, let's say, I guess I don't want to necessarily just say like to make new information or make new memories, but to be able, like, let's say like to do like math in your head or something like that. So basically, what do we know in aging? What's something that we know in aging that does not diminish someone who's like what is not diminished in someone who's aging, I guess. Um,
Well, I'm gonna say that fluid probably diminishes, but like general retention is probably,
good.
I think, more or less fine.
Yep.
But then I don't know, there's so many specifics and nuances with like aging and like I took so many gerontology classes that at this point it's like so ingrained in me that it's hard to separate like
Uh-huh.
short-term versus long-term memory and
Yep. So,
I get what you're saying that like acquiring new information could maybe like be a fluid one, but
yeah. So think about what type of I don't know if you've like interacted with someone like that who has diminished something because of aging. Uh, but what do you think they'd be able to remember the easiest?
you would think general information, but from my experience, like old people forget everything. Like
What
when it's general information, they like forget their kids' birthdays all the time. I
is it?
don't know.
Is that general information though? It is.
General
Yes.
information,
Like
like
who's the president?
certain like cognitive like processes, like things that we're like instinctually born with and like those kinds of things would probably stick around the longest.
Yeah. So like if you
That
ask
would be like the crystallized, the general information.
uh-huh. So yeah, if you ask them like who's the president, what month is it, you know, that type of thing,
Uh-huh.
they would be able to answer that, I would guess, right? They might forget their kids' birthdays and stuff like that, but if you ask them who's the president or something like that, what year is it, that kind of thing, how do you think?
They like that's one of the tests of a stroke is if they remember or not. So I'm assuming that like in this case.
Mhm. So like,
Okay, so I'm
yeah,
changing my answer to D.
yeah.
Ability to cope with Alzheimer's is definitely wrong. Controlling memory process is very specific.
Uh-huh.
Acquiring declarative information could be fluid. So then based on like the fluid versus crystallized, I'm going with D.
Hmm.
But
Yeah, general information, right?
I
Uh,
thought way too specific on that one.
I'm gonna use the bathroom real quick, but in that time,
Okay.
check out the email that I just sent, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
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 Oh yeah, yeah. So some of this stuff is here, and I think on this next page I go over like the types of memory, but yeah. Sensory memory we talked about,
Yeah.
and yeah, it's like less than a second.
Working memory and long-term memory.
Mm-hmm.
The units, chunks.
Yep, yep. Declarative memory.
Uh-huh.
So yep. Okay, we can go to the next question.
Um, I think I prefer the ones that are,
Discrete.
yeah, discrete questions.
You could do that.
Um, Older adults have better memory for events that occurred when a subject was between 10 and 30 years old than during any other time period. Okay. This phenomenon is known as the reminiscence bump, which is known as reminiscence bump occurs with music. For example, older adults recognize the music that they encountered during their late adolescence and early adulthood more easily than the music they encountered later. That music also evokes more specific memories and stronger emotions than music encountered later in life.
What's being said here?
So basically there's like a reminiscence bump that like from 10 to from the ages of 10 to 30, like they have a higher like recognition.
Um, recognition.
Like they recall it better.
Mm-hmm. All right, cool. And that it evokes more.
They're like a more, yeah, about
Yep.
more significant response.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is that like all that we draw from this paragraph? Can you keep reading? Okay. The music children hear is likely to reflect their parents' choices. Thus, the music college-age research participants heard when they were children likely consisted of the recorded music their parents favored at the time. For these reasons, autobiographical memories evoked by music may be distributed differently over the lifespan than other kinds of autobiographical memories.
Okay, tell me about this.
So they're saying that music children hear are likely to reflect parents' choices. So then once they like college aged, um, wait, but
Mhm.
they were saying older adults from 10 to 30. Why are there college aged kids in the experiment?
I guess they're within that 10 to 30 range.
Oh, I was like reading it differently that they were like recalling. Um, so music, it's likely to reflect their parents' choices. So when the music that they listened to in college that they'd heard. So are they saying that like then the music that they would listen to in college like reflected their parents' taste as well because that's what they grew up listening to?
Mm-hmm.
For these reasons, autobiographical memories evoked by music. So it's not really like their life, but their parents' life
Hmm.
almost.
Yep.
Okay, so it's like different, distributed differently over the lifespan than other kinds of autobiographical memories.
Hmm.
So other kinds of memories would be ones that they like formulate on their own that aren't really like
Yep.
influenced by somebody else.
Hmm.
Researchers grouped the two top hits for each year from 1955 to 2009 into clips covering 5-year periods. Each clip contained short excerpts from 10 songs. College-age kids were asked to report the percentage of songs they recognized in each clip and to rate how much they liked the songs in the clip overall. Those who reported having personal memories associated with any of the songs were asked whether the memories were from listening with their parents, alone, or with other people. Those reports, they also reported the degree to which they felt the following emotions when listening to the songs: happiness, sadness, fear, anger, tenderness, nostalgia, and energized. Demographic data, including participants' musical background and their parents' year of birth, were also obtained.
All right, what do they do here?
They're just like listing the like methodology that they were using for the experiments, like what specific, like how the experiment went down.
And how did it go down?
So they had clips, 10 songs from like 5-year clips going from like 55 to 2009. And they were like asked to rate the songs. And then there was also like a whole bunch of factors that they were asking about, like whether or not like there was another person tied to the memory, which is essentially what they're testing, if like it's familial or not.
Yep, so they tested both if they recognize it and if they like it, and also if they have any personal memories associated with the songs, and whether those memories are from listening to the songs with their parents, listening to the songs alone, or listening with other people. And they also
Uh-huh.
have to report how they are, the degree to which they felt these emotions, right?
Right. And they're also asking about like musical backgrounds, if maybe like they heard it with somebody else, that like it still played a role on
Yeah, the demographic data here, I think, is there to make sure we don't have, or make sure that we're accounting for confounding variables, right? Because you could have someone who whose parents did not listen to this type of music, but a person is
grandparent or something.
or if the person's a musician, right, with a musical background,
Uh-huh.
then that could be a reason why they recognize these songs rather than having the parents who listen to them.
Right. Okay. That makes sense.
Mhm. Oh yeah, and for this section, you need to know things like the confounding variable, mediating variable, moderating variable. You need to know
Mhm.
those things.
Okay. So confounding variable would be something that like goes against like what they're testing and almost like disproving it.
Yeah, it wouldn't necessarily go against it, but it would just be some piece of something that would make it so that it's harder to draw a conclusion for
Okay. Makes sense.
some additional information. Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm.
Um, in addition to the usual reminiscence effect, a second reminiscence bump was observed for music that had been popular before the participants were born, when their parents were between 20 and 25 years of age. So then it's going to like what their preferences were, and it's like the second um um like what their parents would listen to.
Okay.
Over time, participants' memories shifted from listening to music chosen by their parents to music chosen by themselves or their peers. Number of personal memories was positively correlated with the percentage of songs recognized and whether the participants liked the songs.
hmm
Okay.
So those personal memories, right, that were mentioned in like that first paragraph was correlated with the numbers, or sorry, with the percentage of of the songs that are recognized. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to make sure that we see that it's correlating with the songs that they recognize, not necessarily how much they like the song. But then they also say, and with whether participants like the song. So they are counting two, but we want to make sure that we understand that those two are distinct.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes. So then this first question is observed and atypical because it represents, well, it's definitely not a reduced memory performance. It's enhanced memory performance, but like otherwise, like this retention, like as far back as it goes from 10 to 30 years old, that would probably like decrease retention. So the function of retention would increase. So I'm going with A.
Uh, so wait, that says,
If it's like the actual like retaining of information, like it's much harder to do. So then the function of retaining it is increasing, like the work that is required. Or am I like thinking too hard on that and it's B?
well, let's think about the word atypical. Because it should make sense that if you have an increasing retention function, an increased ability to retain information, it should make sense that you have pretty good or enhanced memory performance, right?
But
Hmm.
it's not really typical though, if you think about it, because like generally speaking, memories from like earlier on in life aren't like the easiest to recall.
Hmm.
And it's such a like specific category from like 10 years old, which is like relatively young for an older adult, which I'm assuming they're using older as like what, like 50s and up? Like what are the I don't know, but like the parameters are it's like older adult, like they would probably think like something more recent
Well,
or
okay, when you mentioned that older adult thing, the age, what do you think the age would be? Because
well, I think older adult is like something that they use to like politely describe like geriatric age.
well, let's see, right? Because what else did they say in this question stem?
In the question stem, reminiscence bumped is an atypical finding.
So the reminiscence bump observed in older adults. Did they say that the reminiscence bump was noticed or was observed in like 50 plus age people?
Older adult.
So,
Early adulthood,
uh-huh.
they were saying is like up to 30 years old.
Hmm.
So is it anything after 30? Older adults? I don't know, like that's such a
Yeah, I think what they're saying is that so they're saying that what older adults could remember something when they were between 10 and 30. So I think what they mean by the older adults would be like from that age, or rather, yeah, I would say perhaps the age after um
experiment.
30, I guess.
That's such a like interesting.
So, but what I was asking about the atypical finding, like, you know, um, well, okay, you were saying that there should be a decreasing. Sorry, what were you saying? Were you saying that there was like a decreasing retention function?
Well, I was thinking that these are going to be like old people that elderly that I don't know, the fact that it's so long ago is just like not really doesn't really make sense. But I still think that it can't be reduced memory performance because you are recalling something.
Okay, so let's get rid of C and D.
And then my issue here is that now like the increasing or decreasing retention function because you're retaining information from a very specific part of life and the fact that they're saying it's atypical,
Yeah.
I think it's like otherwise decreasing, but here it's increasing.
Well,
But it's not increasing though. That's my issue is that
yeah. So
Huh.
so yeah, we want to see why this reminiscence bump is atypical, right? If it was enhanced memory performance in otherwise increasing retention function, that wouldn't be atypical, right? That would make sense.
Right. So I'm saying that like my issue with like the decreasing or increased function is saying is I thought that it might be like the inverse. Like if it's harder to retain information, then the function of retaining is like working harder.
Okay.
But I don't think that that really makes sense. Like in my head it did, but when I said it out loud, it doesn't.
Yeah, if you
So
have to work harder to do something, then
then the function is down.
so
And then otherwise de decreasing. So the that's what I was saying, that the further on it is from like when it starts, the like harder it is to recall things. Like you don't really remember every like specific thing that happened when you're 10 years old, and as like you
Yeah.
age, it gets like worse and worse. So I'm saying that like in an otherwise decreasing,
Yeah.
like because they were saying that
Hmm.
it's different from other stuff. I don't remember where it is, but I remember that
Hmm.
distributed differently over the lifespan than other kinds of autobiographical memories.
Uh-huh. Yeah. So yeah, we can
This
go
part.
at this two ways, right? We can go at
So
it.
I'm thinking, yeah, B is
Yeah. So we can go at it like this. We could say that, okay, older adults, would they have increasing retention function or decreasing? And you
decreasing.
decreasing. And so you would choose the one that says decreasing. But also, what you could have done is just think about what would be atypical. Because if we don't think about the passage in general, if you have increasing retention function, you should have pretty good memory, right? You should have pretty good memory.
Yeah.
So, and that would be typical. But what would be atypical is if you had increasing retention function, but with like reduced memory performance or enhanced memory performance with otherwise decreasing retention function, right?
Yes.
So, like, so using your knowledge, you were able to determine otherwise decreasing retention function. But if you didn't know that, you would be able to at least eliminate A and D because those should be typical.
Yeah. I don't know. I just like
Because
I got myself like in a knot. I was really overthinking that one.
uh-huh.
But then the second I said it out loud and explained it to you, I was like, wait, that sounds really stupid. There's no way that that's correct.
Yeah, so yeah, so I don't know about that particularly, but let's just if we just looked at the question stem and the questions without the passage and we wanted to find what would be atypical, we should not have A or D because that would be typical.
Right?
Yeah.
So that eliminates those two. But I still think that like reduced memory gave it away for me immediately.
Uh-huh. Yeah. And also it was the otherwise decreasing retention function. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, good.
Don't even think about it. Get her out of here. Zoe, I don't know why you're staring at me.
Is that like your dog or something?
No.
Oh.
Okay, so we said B.
Yeah. All right. This is good. It's related to like, yeah, I sent you some stuff for my notes about memory.
Yeah, that's what we were just.
Yep. I
Is
also
it sensory because it's like the sensation, like hearing the music is like triggering a memory?
oh, so remember when we talked about sensory before, and I said it didn't mean necessarily that it's from some specific sense. So it's in the
Oh, sensory was the one where it was like just a really quick, like reflexive response. Like you memorize it and then you forget it right away. So that was when we were listening, like they were hearing the impulses and they were saying it right away, and then they'd forget right after.
uh-huh, yeah, yeah.
So
And but
that's what sensory is.
you're probably gonna have to plug your laptop in soon.
I think, yeah.
Wait, which would be acting as an electrolytic cell, by the way. Chart charging a battery, yep. But
Um,
yeah, try this out.
implicit memory, I don't think so because that's like, I don't know, that's just like straightforward memory. Semantic is like the opposite, where it's if I remember correctly, I think episodic is the answer here because like you hearing like an impulse and then it's triggering like a specific like memory that was going on like at the time when it was hearing
Mhm.
the song,
Yeah.
the
So
retrieval of like the circumstances that were like being experienced when the song was being played.
yeah, okay, yeah. I have this in the notes that I sent you as well. It's the one that talks about sensory memory and stuff.
Okay. The one that you sent today?
Yeah, the second page here. This one, yeah.
Events and experiences.
Yeah, it's your own life, remembering things that you did. Whereas semantic memory is facts and concepts.
Right.
Narrative encapsulates both.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah. I think in the next page after this I have the decay thing. Or maybe not. Okay. I guess I don't have the decay thing, but I can add that.
Okay.
Yeah, this goes into sensory memory a little bit more as well. First and most fleeting, iconic, echoic, auditory. But yeah. So okay. For yeah, so we can answer that question that we saw based on
So I'm still, like think that my
Mhm. Yep. Good. So yeah, remember, episodic deals with like your own experience, your own life experiences and stuff.
Okay. When did we start? Was it like around now? Have we done 2 hours?
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe we finish this passage and then.
Okay.
Okay. Um, which statement best summarizes the correlations observed in the study?
Mhm.
Positively correlated with and whether the participants like the songs. So this is true.
Mhm.
This is false. Because it said parents and then it didn't say anything about which they liked more.
Yeah, it's parents and then
It just says it shifted.
and peers. Yeah.
Um, positive emotions over music. It didn't say that either because it said that these are the feelings that they were experiencing.
Mhm.
Positive correlation between personal memories and the whether they liked.
Mhm.
I don't know about that one, but as much as the music, so this is wrong.
Okay.
And then out of these answer choices, I think that A
Mhm.
is more like
Yep. Because they
correct.
mentioned any type of, correlation with songs that were associated with negative emotions, right?
No.
Good.
They did say that they like tested for emotions
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
and anger, fear, sadness. Those are negative emotions, but then they didn't find any positive correlation between.
They didn't find any negative
Right. Okay.
correlation, right? So yeah.
Um, socialization would be like the peer like preferences would go above.
It doesn't have to just be peer.
Well, I know, but I just
Mm-hmm.
material culture would also just be like would be more like contemporary stuff rather than like something that they remember and prefer from
Well,
earlier on in life.
material culture just means like being very into objects. Like if you're materialistic, you care about like I want to get like the best computer, I want to get the best clothes, material objects.
Yeah.
So,
Okay, so that doesn't really.
mhm.
I mean, based on the passage, that's what they're getting at, is that like popular culture. So if they're saying that like popular music preferences tend to like have some of like impact on like preferences of the parents, and it does have something to do with like social reproduction. I I'm going off of like very limited like understandings of what these things are, and it's kind of like a guess.
Uh-huh.
But I think D maybe.
So okay. Um, let's so for psych soc, how you should go about this, like after this or whatever, is looking up the terms for everything because they're very specific, like they sound similar, but there's distinct psych soc terms. So um social reproduction is going to be something related to something else. Um,
Hmm.
but what can we eliminate from what else can we eliminate besides material culture?
Counterculture.
Mhm. We can eliminate that, and then we would have agent of socialization or agent of social reproduction.
Socialization, I just think would go more towards like the well, I guess it is. It's like through interactions you like gain the preferences of somebody around you.
Uh-huh.
So they I'm thinking of it from like a friend and a peer perspective, but it could also like include parents.
Yep, yep. It can include like family, school, uh, whatever, your pastor or whatever. Socialization is just the process of learning like the norms and values of a society,
Hmm.
whereas social reproduction is more related to like kind of like I'm not sure if it's exactly conflict theory, but social inequality that goes from one generation to the next. That's like a big thing that they like to talk about in psych soc.
And
Like,
social reproduction.
oh yeah. So yeah, that's referring to like the social inequality that continues from one generation to the next.
Okay.
Yeah. So this one,
That does seem like something that's like in social talk about.
that's what?
That does seem like something that's like in social like passages would talk about a lot.
Mhm.
Okay, so then socialization. That one was tricky without like understanding because I'm hearing like reproduction and that's parents and
Yep.
socialization is like what you do at school with your friends.
Yeah, it seems like it's like okay, we're reproducing the parents like for these songs, but yeah, a lot of these terms have specific meanings in psych soc. Yeah.
Okay. All right, so this is like
Mhm.
okay. Based on the I'm gonna go to this. Over time, participants um shifted from listening to music chosen by parents to music chosen by themselves and their peers. So that's
Yep.
social net.
And same thing if you don't know the front stage self or the other one to
Mhm.
look it up and stuff, learn that stuff.
Behavior a player performs in front of an audience. And backstage is like when no one is present, like what your preferences are.
Mhm.
That's like, I mean, I think that a lot of these things are like almost like you could understand what they're talking about, but it's obviously much better to like look it up and see what the words mean.
Yeah, because they can ask you lots of other like if this is what was a passage about the front stage self or that other one, might require more more knowledge for you to have.
Okay. All right, last one. It's not a simulation,
Okay.
not really a lag either, because
Mhm.
it's not like they're stuck listening to music from, I don't know, like
Mhm.
7 generations ago, because each person had the preference of their parents. Um, Transmission though, I like as far as this goes because it is being like transmitted from one generation to the next.
Yep. Excellent. Good
Okay.
job. Yeah. So I would say that to go through like the psychosocial passages and also the ones from the test that you took, and
Mhm.
any term that you see, even if you got a question right, if there are, terms in these other choices, to look those choices up and to make sure you know that stuff. So that can also include when you're doing Anki, just yeah, it'll probably be worth it for you like today to do lots of Anki psych soc and learn as many of these terms as possible because
Yeah.
it's going to be like
I also really like your printouts
like
because it like condenses it.
the stuff that I just sent.
Yeah, like the PDFs that you have. I was looking at, I know that most of them are in
Mhm.
the like drive that you shared with me because I looked at the brain one like this morning, but as I was starting to study and I was like, I want to take a quick look at like what's in there.
Yep,
And
yep.
it's actually like really easily like laid out and that's
Yeah, yeah.
really
So the stuff that I sent you, I'll like add to that, but I'll add some more. I'll take pictures of some more of my notes from PsychSoc,
Mhm.
and I'll add them to this folder.
Okay,
But,
sounds good.
yeah, I would say to continue learning as many PsychSoc terms as possible. Oh, and make sure you learn about like the experimental method stuff, experimental design, like longitudinal study, cohort study. There's tons. There's tons.
Okay. All right. So that's like a really important. You think that like this memorization, if I should like should I push Psych and Soc hard this week just to make sure that I get all of this stuff? Because I feel like the more you know, the more questions you can get right, and it's like easy points.
Yeah, yeah. PsychSoc is very content dependent, so learning the terms is going to be really good for you. So, you learn it through like looking it up, learn it through the stuff I'm going to share with you, learn it through the Anki decks that you do have, learn it through the review that you're doing of the section bank and the test that you took. It might even help to write uh Anki deck or cards for some of that stuff. That's how I reviewed my full lengths. Like I would write out, make Anki cards for the psych soc topics.
I'm just saying from the perspective of like I have what, 5 days left?
Mhm.
What should I be focusing on? Like, is Psych and Soc a good place to commit my time right now?
Yeah, so it depends on. So you said your test was 2 points higher.
Yeah.
What section?
Cars got better.
Okay, good.
And then I think Psych and Soc got better too by like I don't know, small margin, obviously, but I just think that like the more that I keep doing it, the more it'll go up.
Mhm. Yeah,
Biochem, like I've been reviewing my notes just to make sure like content review
yeah,
is obviously I'm not going to focus on it, but just like to make sure that it's still there. And yeah,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
sounds good. So when can we meet again?
When would you like to meet?
I don't know.
You want to do, um, let's see, tomorrow, same time, 1?
Yeah, potentially. I think I wanted to do an MCAT, but I'm like not. I don't think I have it in me to do a full length tomorrow.
Yeah, you're gonna risk burnout if you do that. So let's meet tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern.
Okay, sounds good. All right, see you then.
See you
Bye
then.
bye.